Welcome to this PSAI talk show. We are today once again Friday at 9:15 for this talk show. My name is Bharti Nayak and I'm the host for today's talk show. I want to tell you something very different today. Have you heard about the word called kintsugi? Kintsugi is centuries old art of repairing broken pottery with gold. I'm sure many of us would have seen pictures where the broken pottery is put together and they are fixed together using gold. Well, there are many ways to do it, but Japanese centuries since this old tradition is been going on, and that's called kintsugi. Now, this is so interesting, isn't it? That how you put all the broken pieces together and the same broken those pieces which had maybe no importance suddenly become so meaningful, become so beautiful, and it has its own shape, it has its own identity, it has its own virtue, and that's what kintsugi is. But if I have to ask you, how about having 455 pieces, 455 fractures of the skull? How would you put together? Think about it. Well, doctors did made a lot of attempt to put those pieces together. But here's today our special guest, our very own PSAI member, Anjali Rajagopal. You know how she put those pieces together? She put those pieces together with her resilience, with her strength, with one set mind, with one mindset that I will make it happen for myself. I will claim to the identity that I want to create. And I would say that that's the goal that she put together, and she reclaimed her identity, that who she is. Now I'm sure you all are waiting for her to join in today's talk show. But let me tell you something about this association, the beautiful and the wonderful association that we all have, Professional Speakers Association of India, where the seed was put in 2018, where a bunch of all the speakers came together and thought about putting this association, where we all know that there are speakers in the world. But the moment you say that you are a professional speaker, there is a difference. There's a lot of difference how you deliver, how do you position yourself, how you put yourself in front of the client and give the effectiveness that is required in your talk. It's just not about motivation. It's about narrating your story. It's about putting that hard if efforts that you have put in all the experiences that you had. So PSAI is the association where all the speakers, all the members, they come together and we celebrate, we enjoy, we learn, we share with each other, we ask questions, and we grow together. And there's only one vision that we all have: to be number one professional speakers association in the world. And we are sticking to ourselves with our values, the values of right, having respect for each other, and having immense integrity, trust, and striving towards excellence. And that's what the mission of PSAI is: to put that excellence in the business of professional speaking. That's what we are. And let me tell you what is there for all of us today. Now, just think about it. After a horrific car accident in 2002, life would have not been the same for Anjali. With 455 skull fractures, disfigured face, 75% blindness, loss of smell, loss of taste, loss of memory, and numerous surgeries. The path to recovery would test her resilience like never before. But as she rose from the ashes to battle all the odds, she discovered and still on the path to claiming her true identity. And it nearly 10 years to channelize all the learnings of the tragedy into her superpower. She speaks at several prominent forums to share her story, inspires thousands with her message, and in 2013, she launched the Phoenix Initiative, followed by Face It. In 2015, to empower in facing trauma and helplessness through therapies and counseling. Fast forward today, she's a leading businesswoman who heads the e-commerce and East retail division for a national clothing brand with a book and her own talk show coming soon. Her latest accomplishment is an acceptance to the Ivy League M7 Wharton Business School with an esteemed Silverstein MBA fellowship. And this is who Anjali is for us. And let me put this across that she is also a TEDx speaker. She's also a founder of Touche PR, and she is an awardee of Women Empowerment, advocate of identity, strongly believes in creating your own identity. And that's who Anjali is for us. So let me welcome her on this PSAI talk show with lots of hugs, lots of wishes.
Thank you so much, Pati. It's such a pleasure. That was a truly humbling introduction and really set the tone for the evening. So glad I could be here with you this evening. And you look fantastic. And I'm very excited to see what you have in store.
Lovely, Anjali. It's really a pleasure to have you today. Anjali, I want to ask you a very pertinent question that I have seen many speakers, they share their stories and they start their talk with their stories. What do you think, what could be the reason why they start their talk with the stories?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think very pertinent, not just for speakers, but also for listeners, for business leaders, for anyone who's trying to get a message across in today's clustered and cluttered, noisy world of content and communication. But I think especially speakers, one is to, I think, to relate, to strike an emotional chord with the person who's listening, and to let them know that, listen, I am exactly like you, and you perhaps have been exactly where I was. And especially, at least from my point of view, whether it's a motivational speech or whether it's a specialized piece of content, I think it is to connect with the audience and create that one vulnerable moment where you get and grab their attention. So I think starting with a story is always a great way to personalize the interaction and make it feel more one-on-one than just a speech to a large group.
Yeah, I think what you have put up a very important highlight that speakers need to connect with their audience, and how better way than narrating and sharing your story where you know that you are vulnerable, and that connects people. It gives that emotional bond, and that's very important for speakers to connect. Thank you so much, Anjali. I was looking through your profile as well, and I know we are connected on LinkedIn. Uh, I came across Wharton MBA fellowship. Tell us something about this. How important it is for you to be there?
I think that is Wharton is sort of been the culmination of so many years of dreaming and building and putting brick upon brick and layer upon layer. And to be honest, Wharton did not come into my sight until the beginning of the lockdown. I mean, I think it had always been a long-standing dream for me to attend a business school of that esteem and repute. But ever since the accident that you mentioned sort of sent my life careening down a different path than which I had imagined for myself, things like Wharton seemed like not just a far-off dream, but almost physically impossible to do. So it is so very important because it symbolizes so many things for me. Not just one is to be academically capable, the other is to have the will or the grit or the ambition. But for me, the execution and bringing it to reality over the last, putting one foot in front of the other over the last decade is what I think matters and means the most. And when I started down this, and I feel my journey has been made up of several chapters. And the first chapter started even before the accident, which was one of great optimism and idealism and dreams and ambition. And I was a very unfettered soul, a girl with great dreams, ambitions, and wonderful parents who supported everything. And then life took a different turn where none of us, especially myself, had any control. So everything I've done after that has been very intentional and very deliberate. So Wharton somehow symbolizes that absolute pinnacle of ambition and achievement, which, the path that I was taken off of so many years ago. And I somehow managed to take a very circuitous route back to it. So when I applied, I had so many doubts in my mind whether, I would make the cut, whether I would be in line, whether I would put it down, or, whether I would compare to the other esteemed classmates of mine who come firms or the IITs or wherever, who have done these wonderful things. And I saw my life as, just piecing my own little fractured pot back together. And, while I perhaps dreamed and aspired to infuse gold dust into it, Wharton really now shows me that perhaps there is, gold dust. So this acceptance is so huge for me as somebody who's faced, not just fractured dreams, but, in terms of limited vision, in terms of disability, in terms of the Indian woman being able to reinvent herself, a woman with challenges being able to reinvent herself, an individual. I mean, the reason I say women is because we face layered challenges. I mean, not that men don't, but Wharton really is that arena for me to go and show up and show the world what I can really do over and above, I think, what limited amounts I've been able to achieve so far. And getting the fellowship really was the cherry on top of the cake. So, I know that now I know they really do want me. I did have a very tough choice amongst other very competitive schools, but, Wharton is Wharton. And I'm actually leaving in less than 72 hours. So very happy to be with you on the show right before this would be my actual final show in India.
Yes, and it was like I was putting you the dates, and we somehow managed to put the date together, and that was really, really good that we could make this talk show happen. And yes, fellowship is a cherry on the whole cake that you are going to Wharton. The question is, going back to education, going back to academics, after you have earned so much, the stand that you have, the identity that you have created, being a founder at Touche PR, doing so many things. Now going back to academics, is it really important for you to, at this juncture of your stage of your life, that you want to go back to academics? And how important it is for a speaker to be connected with the education?
Incredible questions, Bharti. Really, I should give you an award for being, I think, for having some of the best questions that I have experienced. But let me take that in sequence, as you mentioned it. Now, the thing is, the world that we're living in, and I know lots of people have heard this said in so many ways, but I want to specifically say this to my, because I mean, I've been a founder at Touche, which was a PR startup in India, in an ecosystem where public relations was extremely unstructured. And I had done an MS in PR and corporate communication from New York University. So I had a very scientific viewpoint as to how to, give a client a public relations solution. So Touche had its journey in terms of the USP that it had to deliver. I then transitioned to Indian terrain. in which I have my own vested interest because it is a family business and a publicly listed company. But what I did there was I was an entrepreneur because they were a traditional company which was very brick and mortar, very multiple 200 plus stores, 1,000 plus doors across the country. But e-commerce was not a channel that they had tapped yet. And so when I transitioned back into Indian Terrain, I wanted to take up the challenge of launching an e-commerce division that would be as robust and as scalable as the promise of tomorrow. So that was obviously 2016, and now that we see, it's almost like that was the right thing to do at the right time, because come pandemic, the entire country went into lockdown, and and India as an economy and us globally. As a world of consumers, are looking for a multi-touch point solution to our needs. So that is sort of the. So when I say education from an industry perspective, it's extremely important for me to go back to school right now, because the world has changed, the environment has changed, and unless we upskill and upgrade at the institutions that are at the front of the line. See, Wharton, Harvard, and Stanford are at the apex of innovation, digital science, and entrepreneurship. And that's, if I want to continue to make an impact, whether it is in India or globally, I really need to learn what's happening 10 years and 20 years ahead. Because as a professional so far, I've been lucky enough to identify opportunities and take advantage of them. But at the pace at which things are going, I think I definitely would need that kind of world-class education. Now, as a speaker, I feel that, and especially for me as a motivational speaker, I need to live an inspirational life if I'm going to be inspiring others. I can't keep repeating the same chapter over and over again without layering it with more chapters of me challenging myself to greater and greater heights. I mean, of course, there's risk that comes with that, because there's always the question of succeeding or failing.
Yeah.
Either way, I will have a story, and that story is always of value to the one who's listening. So I wanted to also, and the third part is I love the part where you said going back after making a so-called name for yourself. Now, I would not say I've made an incredible name. I think I've managed to do a small amount, in terms of as a speaker or as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman, but I believe that I have miles to go in terms of what I could potentially contribute. Now, there's two parts to this. One is going back to education. The longer you stay away, the harder it is to go back, because you do have to do the exams. So, full disclosure, I had to do the GRE and the GMAT. I had to submit all of my scores. I had to submit everything. And you have to compete and be ready to have your skin your knees and get hurt.
Yeah.
But that is while that is the hard part in one way, the exciting part is being able to adapt and go back to a focused time which is dedicated only to learning. Because the thing about part-time programs and programs where you're half there, half not there, I am personally believe that one needs to go and immerse oneself in order to transform and come back as a new version. So yes, while it's difficult, I think it brings forth those analytical abilities of ours which go back. Often once we start working, we get used to doing front ending, we get used to doing client service, we stop doing our Excel sheets ourselves, we stop doing the math ourselves. So, in that way, it's unlocked parts of my brain again. And I would like to say I'm ready to get back in the game and ready to solve more complex problems. And finally, I think the timing of all of this to be back at a global institution to learn is fantastic, because now if you see issues of mental health, happiness in the workplace, work-life balance, and most importantly, diversity, equity, and inclusion has come to the forefront at business school. 10 years ago, this was not the case. 10 years ago, diversity was not a conversation. This time, now that, as a Silverstein fellow, as a Wharton incoming graduate, I know that not just my classmates, colleagues, but professors are looking at me to not just bring in some analytical knowledge of the Indian apparel industry, but they're looking at me as a woman of the future, as an individual who's been able to overcome challenges, overcome disability, overcome, gender bias, to be a leader of a very different tomorrow, where, there are going to be many more people like me, because like you said, resilience, which is the backbone of my story, is going to be the backbone of all of our stories coming out of COVID. Everyone is recovering. So perhaps I think for me, this is the perfect choice. And for anyone out there who's thinking about going back to education, it is absolutely never too late. In fact, right now is the right time.
Fantastic. I think, Anjali, you have opened a Pandora box for me. So now I had like few questions. Now I have more questions. And these questions are going to never end, I believe, Anjali. Uh, you mentioned about being a founder of Touche PR.
Right.
Tell me, why did you enter into the PR as you moved into your life, and how, as a professional speaker, if we need to say use the PR for branding or marketing or positioning ourselves, how is it important, and what are the ways that if we want to do that?
Again, fantastic question. She's got bazookas all over the place. So let me take that in sequence, as you mentioned. So why did I? Now let me. My foray into PR is both professional and personal. I was coming out of, identity crisis is even too small of a word to talk about what happened to me. So when I was decided to step out of the hospital and go to university, I had to spend the first 2 years of those 2 years wearing sunglasses 24 hours a day, because most of my face was not fully operated. But so you understand how you appear actually physically, emotionally, and psychologically impacts people. So the things you say and do as a human being, and then as a brand, and then further on as an enterprise, and then further on as a set of values, is so very important. So I realized this at the age of 18 because I had to. I realized the way I presented would mean not just my individual success, it would also mean my individual absolute demise. I would either make it or I would die. So for me, it was a question of you do or die on a daily basis. Now, as it evolved into me making it through university and graduating and starting my first job, I realized that as I had learned to mold myself into being, because I had I had to accept the new one I was given. I had to learn makeup. So while I physically learned the art of tweaking and polishing, I also learned the psychology of presenting to people what would inspire them or what the message they would want to hear, which is that, because that was what would give me a job, get me accepted to a group of friends, make my family connect with me again, because they had also lost a daughter. I had not just lost myself, right? Everybody had lost someone that day. So that was my personal motivation. So when I found myself back in the workplace, I found myself always wanting to make things look better, sound better, and be adopted. So that's when I started my career. And Indian Terrain at that time, which is where I've had my first job, was getting into women's wear, which they did for a short period. So it was a perfect opportunity for me to start an in-house PR division. But then, as usual in Anjali style, I always needed and wanted to do more. And exploring is something that comes with the territory. So I actually moved into media. And that set the foundation for me wanting to understand PR, because media is one part of PR, but most of the strategy and most of the action, as they put it, happens behind the camera or behind, and that's where the money is put, the message is drawn, and the strategy is placed. So that's where most of the work happens. So that had motivated my MS, my master's studies in New York. So when I came to Touche, and the reason I built up to this is because Touche was a very deliberate, intentional idea. Because when I came back to India, I realized that my understanding of PR and what was being given to people here as a solution was not at all in line with what I had heard. I had heard people from the New York Times talk, the Netflix, to be honest, the Netflix PR disaster happened as I was finishing, which was when Netflix went from a CD, DVD delivery system to an online streaming system. And they actually made a very big public relations mistake where their share price dropped and so on and so forth. So I had been part of these amazing case studies. And then I came to Chennai where everybody was like, PR, oh, let's have a party. Let's have an event. Let's call people. And they would spend all this money, invite all these people who would come eat their food, drink their alcohol, and go home and not buy their product. So there was no strategy and there was no ROI. So Touche was born in an effort to quantify public relations as a service and a delivery, and to give individuals and small companies what they needed in terms of making a name for themselves. The second part of the question, which is very, very important, I think, especially to our audience today, is that PR is also the backbone of who we are as speakers. Because speaking and speaking and speaking, ultimately, there's only so much you can say. You can say it in so many different ways. There are multiple permutations and combinations, but you're going to, and you can't talk to every demographic about every trending subject, because then you just, become like air, oxygen, and ubiquitous. But your PR is what makes people call you back again and again, and continues to make you relevant, right? So I think it's very important for a speaker to first figure out who they are, what their message is, who they want to talk to, and more importantly, you have to start with the why. Why am I a speaker? Because I'm not saying everybody should be one. In fact, I feel most people shouldn't be speakers. Like, it's not necessarily something everybody should be doing, because I don't advocate like cacophony. So I always feel that once a speaker is figured out, and I know that we all have a message to give, it's just not every one of us figures out how to give it or who to give it to. So I would suggest, so PR as an aspect, so the media aspect is one of it. Understanding self-awareness would be the first one. Media always comes second or third. And then which media to take advantage of, which molds to set. And I think if I were to give my biggest piece of advice, is to always benchmark before you start. Find someone you admire, or somebody or something, and make sure it aligns with you in values. I think the biggest mistake speakers make is they try to become the next coolest thing. The problem is the world is changing every day, and you can't change as a speaker every day. In fact, the only thing you should do is stay true to yourself consistently, and find new ways to be consistent. So in the world that is ever changing, I think speakers find it hard to stay consistent. But the conundrum comes, and I completely empathize with speakers because I have a PR background, is that it is very difficult to stay consistent and continue to be cool. Because how do you be cool consistently? Because it almost is an oxymoron, right? Because once something becomes old, it's not cool anymore. But there are lots of ways to stay consistently cool, and I think that is the secret sauce behind being a speaker that is called back more often than not.
Oh my God, Anjali, I knew that you are a fire bomb, but I didn't know, because I didn't know that it is coming my way in this talk show. So I'm really very happy to interact with you and to get so many good pieces of advices, and they are really important. I really loved when you say that it's not necessary that everybody should become a speaker. Not necessary. We have a message. Obviously, we all have gone through some experiences of our life, so we have a message. It is a different story that we don't know how to say it, how to present that message, and maybe to whom we must say it. But
Right.
yes, you rightly mentioned about that. Very interestingly, I want to know about Indian terrain, where you say that that's a very family traditional business which was there, and when you stepped in, you were more like an entrepreneur, and you said, okay, let me now do it my way. And I know Anjali's way is very different. So, how how was it? I know there might be some hiccups as well, considering the traditional business that you entered into. So, tell us some stories or some snippets about how was that journey for you when you entered into it. Was it I won't say easy, but what were the challenges that you faced to make Indian terrain as it is right now, with the public limited, and with having e-commerce every in all the platforms I've seen, it's there, it's present. So tell us
It is.
something about that. Yeah. So tell us some snippets about it. That how was it, that whole journey?
100%. I think your questions are also, I mean, the chronology of them is perfect, because initially in my first stint, I think that, I already covered it, because so that was where I found my love for PR. So I think the more important part which we're coming to is the e-commerce element of Indian Terrain. Now, Indian Terrain is a 20-year-old legacy business. So this is a business that knows itself, it knows its product, it knows its DNA. Most of the gentlemen on this who would be watching this live, I'm sure, would have tried our khakis, which we're very, very proud of. And we do a lot of different wonderful products. And that is really because we are what do you call, and export business first. So our quality is really global in standard. But when I say traditional, is that, what they always say in business, when it's, why fix it if it's not broken? Number one. Number two, they always ask you, like, if you're doing well and you're already in certain spaces, why would you want to overstretch, especially if you're publicly listed, you have investors, you have 100 different people's point of view to consider. And so your valuation becomes, and consideration of that valuation becomes very important. Now, why e-commerce was the name of the game for digitally first products? See, products that were born in 2016 and 2015 and stuff like that could go digital first, but we were born in 2000. So this was a company that already, so the minute you bring e-commerce into the game, you are threatening your own stores in principle, right? Because you're, right? So then there's the question of cannibalization comes up, the question of liquidating an existing brand value comes up, and the overarching blasphemy, which is e-commerce today, unfortunately, or at least how e-commerce is perceived, is the issue of discounting, which is, nobody who has run a business for that amount of time and built that level of brand equity will be dying to give you the torch and say, oh, go and do e-commerce and go ahead and liquidate the equity that I've built over so many years. So in many ways, I was bringing a very new idea, a rebellious idea, and an idea that had to be managed and balancing multiple stakeholders in a very careful way. I could have had any thoughts about technology and digital, which I do, which is why, Wharton loves me. But at that 2016 time, I don't think Indian Terrain was sold on the idea. So, but I must give credit to my mentor, who is my MD. I've always reported, the good thing about the structure of our company is that I've always reported to a professional. I've never reported to a family member. I don't report to my dad or anything like that. So I've always been in a very professional structure. And I think that's a great way to grow as an individual. Now, some of the challenges which come with, I think, working in a professionally run family business is that people assume that you have privilege. Okay. The truth is, we don't just not have privilege, we have the opposite of privilege. So what happens is that, you have to prove yourself that much more to show that, you are not taking the easy way out. But I think that's only helped me, while it may not have seemed so at the time, because, there were days when I felt, why are things so difficult? But I think I was given a very fair opportunity, but a very difficult one. So what my MD said to me was, okay, you can do e-commerce, but you have to do it as a pilot project for 6 months, and you can only do it with old inventory.
Mm-hmm.
Right? One is that, my customer may or may not know it's old inventory, but the inventory on the channels that I build or present will not match what is in the stores or match what is on the brand campaign. So while we have always had celebrity brand ambassadors and stuff, if somebody were to come and say, I want that jacket that Kunal Kapoor is wearing, or Dhoni is wearing, or Randeep Hooda is wearing, whichever be the brand ambassador it was at that time, I can't offer him that on e-commerce. But I had no problem with it. I said all I needed was that one chance, because I had seen the opportunity in scalability. Because the thing about e-commerce and the beauty about it is that it is 90% technology, 10% people. And while we all love people and believe that human beings are perfect, we are inherently flawed. And the beauty of technology is that it usually does what you tell it to do. So so the good news was that. So I had a plan in place. So I had this wonderful opportunity to build all the first relationships for Indian Trade with Myntra, with Flipkart, with Amazon, and went ahead and built those relationships. But you asked me for a story. So let me sort of highlight something that I learned, that I took into my essays, into my entire appeal to Wharton, because at Wharton there were 8,000 applicants and ultimately only 700 of us are in the class. So that's less than 12%. Right? So there's only 700 people in the world this year who are going to this esteemed school. So how was I going to tell that story? And in many ways, Indian Terrain's experience gave me the opportunity to show how I had, because as a professional or a speaker, you have to show that you have battled more odds than just your personal ones. Right?
Correct.
Because ultimately we are all fighting different kinds of battles, right? So I think the most difficult job, or at least where I had to prove myself, was to build a consensus within the organization that this fourth channel was a good idea. Like, why would the head of stores want to be excited about this? Because that means his customer can order online. right? And if he's going to quantify that, so it's very hard. So what I learned, and I think what I have found later on to become the most important, was that I started to give credit to the rest of them and say that, I thank them for giving me the opportunity to even take their old inventory. But the good news was, I mean, what I told my MD and what my MD agreed was that ultimately this inventory was going to come back from stores and go to wholesale. I said, give me this opportunity to build a business, because I believe that there is a new customer out there who, is shopping for good prices, who's shopping for options. And the options that I can stock, because I'm not limited to a store, is multifold, because it's in a warehouse and not limited by store space. So, rather than get into the technicalities of e-commerce, what I wanted to say is that I think my biggest challenges were fighting that presumed assumption that I have privilege, because I didn't. Second was to be in a completely menswear is a male dominated sphere. Okay, so there are so it's not normal. And the e-commerce was not the only thing I took on. Like you mentioned, I also did East retail. So I set up stores in places like Bihar and counters in places like Nagaland, and I went to places where they had not seen a woman enter. Okay,
Oh,
so because they're Hindi speaking, like the gentleman in Jharkhand who has my product in some small alley is suddenly meeting, and then I mean, to slip into the vernacular, ye kahan se aa gayi ye? Like, is what they're like, who is this person? Like, so I got the opportunity to do a lot of very different things, but I think that shaped me as an individual, as a professional, and I think my life story, because I've never, I started off understanding very early in life that life doesn't owe me anything. I was always ready to prove and, get my hands dirty. So if somebody said, take a flight and do this, I was like, okay, sure, why not? It was never a question of complaining. And I think what was most exciting is I got to meet the diversity that is there in our country. Because while on the one hand, I've been educated at premium institutions in New York, I've also been to Jharkhand and Nagaland and worked with my distributors and tried to negotiate shipping costs. So I've been able to see the entire gamut, which was both a privilege and a challenge. Because the challenge was that I was working 24/7, traveling 23 days in a month, and I barely slept. And I used to wake up at 1:30 in the morning and wear makeup and get on a flight at 4. But now when it's put into a 400 word essay, it sounds very good. But there were definitely times when I felt overstretched, over leveraged. And I felt like I was wondering, would I ever break through, a business, a legacy business? But now, given fast forward to today, during the pandemic, e-commerce is what still I wasn't wrong or too aggressive or too risky. So I can only say, do the math though before you start would be
yeah.
my only piece of advice.
Lovely, Anjali. I have picked up many things as a professional speaker. One, the important question: why fix it if it is not broken? And that is a very a very common question that we ask ourselves, that if it is running the way it is running, then why do you need to fix it? Sometimes, if I have to understand your story, it was not about fixing, it was about expanding, looking at more new opportunities, different avenues that we can produce. The second important part that I loved about was that Indian Terrain, we knew about our products, we knew the DNA of the entire company. Now, as a speaker, if I know about my products, if I know about the DNA, I know that I can enter into any territory and win over it. The third important part that I loved was that you were reporting to a mentor, to a professional, rather than a family member. And I think that that made a lot of difference, because as a professional, when you're reporting to somebody, you know that you are answerable, you have somebody to question, you have somebody to discuss and bring those ideas into shape, and you will have that space for yourself. I just loved it. I mean, there are many things that I can pull out from this entire story, where you said like I battled more odds, and I think you're giving a lot of energy on this talk show. Uh, loved it, Anjali. You have been saying this sentence in this, like we are already there by 30-35 minutes on the talk show. My God, didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So
Time
so
flies
you
when
you
you're
have
having
been
fun, right?
I mean, you have been saying this sentence that world changes and world changed. So, and it keeps changing on for every one of us. Like with the COVID, everything changed. Your world changed 2002. It completely changed. I really want to know how. I know it will be taking you back in 2002. Tell me how, as Anjali, as who you are, how did you come out of this with every single step, with every single move, and became the person that we are seeing today as a very strong, resilient, having that kar lete hain, Lokesh is saying, cannibalize to grow. How did you do that? I know I'll be touching few of the chords, but I
No,
would want.
no, 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 no. In fact, it was a complete. It was always. I wish I said that. I wish I could say that I had, a vision of what I would eventually come out as. I think what happened to me is I was too young and only half developed, really, because 18, 19, 20, 21 is when you're finding your identity as a human being with your value system, your looks, your value in the forget. I mean, it's not, that's the time when people are asking you the question, what do you want to be when you grow up, and I think that, and my answer to that question, I want to be grow up, I want to be alive, right? So when your question and your answer is that at 18, your only, what happened to me was I just wanted to make it to tomorrow. And so I only focused on continuing to breathe, to speak, to be awake. So I'm going to take you back to the days in the hospital when I couldn't see anything. So I had the first for 30 to 40 days of my hospital stay, from when my memory, from what I can recall, is I was completely blind. So I could only hear my father's voice faintly telling me, this is your name, this is the date, this is what has happened, this is where you are. And from what I'm told, I would forget the next day. And what I didn't realize at that time is that my hands were locked into the sides of the hospital bed, because I hadn't realized, and I was just responding. So I kept trying to claw at my face. And the thing is, in India at that time, or even in the world in 2002, this kind of surgery, it's not like fixing one bone, right? It's like fixing multiple powdered, fractured. So they didn't even know where to start. So I was, while my face was fractured, the bones were reforming in the wrong places. My eyesight was going. I had swelling in my brain. So I just remember, and I'm asked a little bit to my at the hospital in the US, where the doctors used to keep telling me, we can only do 50%, you have to do 50%. So my entire thought process has always been, I have to do 50%, if not 100% of ought to do all of the time, but I always knew I had to do something. So if it was the question of staying alive, breathing, having an intentional thought, which is, I'm going to be awake tomorrow. I remember my father and I used to have conversations in the ICU about what pizza we would order when we would go out for the first time after I got discharged. Now, all of us, now those are very small dreams, but we set intentions like that. And he is one of the very big reasons that I am very much here today, because we are exactly the same person. We have never, ever, I've never heard him say or think about giving up. And I think I've always grown up with that in some part in the back of my head. So giving up has never been an option. So the question of, oh, am I going to die, has never really come up. It's always been, am I going to choose to die? And I think that when I used to not be able to see, and my little bit of my vision had not come back, and I used to hear doctors, my eyes were anyway shut out of swelling. But I remember telling myself, Anjali, whatever happens, and all you want to do is go to sleep, because you're so tired, your body's so battered. And even after the accident, after every surgery is like an accident, right? Because the invasion is, they invade your brain and your head, and they do the work that they have to do. So I won't even go down the route of physical pain. You have to spiritually and emotionally stay awake. And for that, you need to continue to think. So I would visualize what I would do next, what I would shop for, what classes I would take, which college I would eventually go to. And I eventually ended up dictating my undergraduate essay from my hospital bed, which somebody sent to the college after the deadline. The deadline had passed. I was not still in hospital. but they were so impressed that they came and saw me and they interviewed me and they admitted me. So even though I landed up, in sunglasses and half done and all of that, I used to wear 5-inch heels in the snow when I could barely see. But that's because I envisioned myself as being that cool girl on campus who would have that life. So I think that my thoughts have always been stronger than my reality, and they've always been one step ahead. So while I've always had envisioned something in place, it's always been, the thought has been there and Anjali played catch up. The thought has been there and I physically played catch up. So I always have been very vibrant in my brain. And which is brings me to my whole, and to come to my TED talk, which I gave in 2019, which I'm sure you'll get to, but I'll just still mention it here because your identity is a set of thoughts, right? And then you build around it, whether it's makeup, whether it's a skill set, whether it's Wharton, whether it's an e-commerce line, whether it's a founding a brand. What are all of these things? These are attributes that I have added to build a little palace for myself, which I can now say that I am here. Because what was taken away from me was my beautiful face, which I know will never come back. Right? So, so with all of that heavy acceptance and some level of, was I sad or grieving? Yes, I was. But I was very busy repairing. So by the time I would get to the end of my day repairing that little bit of my life, I would be too tired. And so I would go to sleep and wake up and repair again the next day. So I'm still always repairing and fixing and polishing. And I wonder if my house of dreams will ever be done, or maybe it will never be. But I always find people are always so in admiration of what they say they think I've done. And I always feel that I've barely ever I haven't even gotten it. I'm still in there. So that's really what keeps me going from today.
That's lovely. I think you have touched some very, very deep chords that has not just influenced me, but I'm sure whomsoever is watching now and they are going to watch the recording later, I'm going to go back and watch this recording again. It has touched a very deep chord about you only look what is next tomorrow, and you keep on building that thought and you keep catching that thought.
Yeah. And I think one important thing I want to say here is that, thought and action are always like in this dance together. Right? So are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me? Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Sorry.
The
I think we had a
sudden
connection.
connection. Yeah, yeah, very sorry for that.
No problem. No problem. We're good.
Yeah. So what I was mentioning about is very important chords that you touched, the identity part that you narrated by saying that what are these? These are all the attributes that you have placed together to build your beautiful palace, and this is what you created yourself as an identity. I think that's really beautiful, really beautiful. And here is what I would love to ask you, Anjali. And this is the interesting part of our talk show, which is our rapid fire. And we keep it very, very surprise for all the guests that comes on the talk show. And these are going to be very quick questions, all right? So you need to answer it in like one shot. All right. So no
May I
thinking,
may I
nothing.
say something? May I say something just before you start the rapid fire? I wanted to say something because before we got cut off, because I was actually saying something very. So when I was talking about thoughts and thinking and staying vibrant, right?
Yeah.
Thoughts and action are extremely important, and I feel like a lot of speakers, individuals, professions, I find a lot of people think, don't act. A lot of people are acting without strategy, and it is a very, very delicate dance that you have to keep doing together, because you have to think, you have to iterate, you have to act, and ultimately you'll have 5 good ideas, out of which maybe zero point 0.5 of them will be worthwhile, but only if you try them out. And then you also have to find that amount of time that you will give in to actually finally succeed. So there is the giving up too early or giving up too late. So it's a very nuanced discussion, but I wanted to definitely reiterate though that, if I had laid in bed just thinking, nothing would have happened. And
Yeah.
there is a lot of action that went with it. So I just want people to know that it's that action, which adds layers to your story, will eventually make you a great speaker. Because content is king, and sometimes you do need to act in order to add chapters. But yes, please go ahead with your rapid fire.
Lovely, lovely. Uh, Tell me one thing that people don't know about you.
I live my life with a calendar. Like, I mean, people who are very close to me know that, but I actually follow a something called indistractability, which I've been following, which is by a thought leader called
Hmm.
Niraya. So
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his. So I've pretty much I plan my day in boxes, and it helps me not just stay efficient, but it's also very, like, I'm very married to it. Like, I even schedule dinner and family and friends and stuff according to that. So a lot of people who see me as a very spontaneous, effervescent, like, they only see the media part, and a lot of people don't know me, like what I actually, how I program myself, right? So I'm extremely planned, and every
Lovely,
day, every minute of my day is committed.
lovely. So is it sea trips, going to the beaches, or mountain trekking? What do you prefer?
Good question. I would say sea over mountain. I don't like trekking, to be honest. Like, peeing in the forest is not fun. Camping is not fun. I need like a soft, warm bed. I need lots of pillows. Sleep is a luxury. It doesn't come easily to me. And when I get it, I need it to be in a place that, is warm and cuddly and safe. So no treks, thank you.
Okay. Uh, the latest book that you are reading now? Any book that you're reading?
Besides Indistractable, there's another book which I mean, it's not new, but I read it fairly recently. But this was pre Wharton, when I just got obsessed with Wharton. But this is the autobiography of Mike Tyson, which is called The
Wow.
Undisputed Truth. The Undisputed Truth, which I found very amazing, and I resonated with at several levels, and it was really an amazing story. So I would recommend it to anyone.
Lovely. And if you could talk in your sleep, what would you say?
Can I have 1 more minute?
Oh, lovely. I love you for that.
I don't want to wake up now. Can I have
Yeah,
1 more minute,
1 more
please?
minute.
5 more minutes, 10 more minutes. That's what I would say.
Lovely. Okay. And lastly is, what is your message to the audience, to our audience who are watching the talk show?
I'm not going to be trite, but what I'm going to say is that, you can reimagine yourself at any age, stage, and stage of, like you said, brokenness, because we all feel broken one way or the other. And you know what the oxymoron of life world and setting is that while we're all so fractured, we're all doing our desperate best to look so perfectly put together, and that is the complete and that's what causes our own inner conflict, because we want to look okay when we're not feeling okay. And I believe that there is a way to create and weave a story of success around being first accepting you're not feeling okay and you're not okay, and then building up from that and making that your message to actually, achieving and being. And I think that that's the journey of life, and it's not going to come easily or fast or simply to anyone. And every one of us, sort of has our own need to talk about. But I truly believe that, when I say thinking out of the box in 2021 is very different from thinking out of the box when Facebook happened. Because now we
Correct.
have to think out of our own emotional boxes. Because we're now in a world where we've all been living in the past decade where, everything is fast food, fast ideas, fast solution, internet dating, all of that. And then there's this sense of loss of identity, loss of jobs, loss of value, and we just don't know how to cope. So so rather than just say, oh, love yourself and stuff like that, I'm going to go ahead and say, reimagine. Now is the time to rethink, because in another 5 years, people would have moved on. In another 1 year, people would have moved on. And even the pandemic will be old news. So use this as an opportunity to tap into those parts of yourself that remain unhealed, and see if you can turn that into your motivation and your building blocks for the future.
Lovely, lovely. I believe, Anjali, there are many, many, many pearls of wisdom that you shared today, and it's not. I would say this is not only like once a talk show that we will watch it. We are going to watch it. I'm going to do it on a repeat mode to pick up as many pearls that I can. And it was wonderful, really wonderful, the way you gave us all the possible answers that you could, opened up some of the corners of your life. That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Anjali, for coming to the talk show.
Thank you so
Really.
much, Bharti. Your questions have been phenomenal. I think you definitely are a professional speaker, professional interviewer, professional talk show. Now it's time for a TV channel network to pick this up. And when you do eventually get picked up, I would happy to come back with my
Oh,
Wharton
lovely.
story and tell you all
Oh,
about it.
yes.
In fact, we should plan something from campus, maybe after for well into the action in the US, and maybe we will take everyone right to the center of where everything happens, and that might be an interesting episode.
That will be fantastic. That will be really
Thank you for
fantastic.
the
Looking forward
opportunity.
for
I
more
really
such. Lovely, lovely to have you, Anjali, here. Thank you so much.
thank you so much, Bharti.
Bye. Yes, and that is Anjali Rajagopal for us. Let me invite the co-host for the talk show, co-host for today, Anupriya Chaudhary, and let us hear from her by being at the backstage. What were the learnings? What were the pearls that she was picking up from the talk show? Hey Anu, how are you?
Hi, Bharti. I haven't spoken a word, but I'm breathless already. I think that should sum up my experience of listening to this entire talk show. Uh, it was so much more than just a conversation or just a motivational speaker speaking. It was business lessons. It was, business lessons in e-commerce. It was life lessons. It was about walking one step at a time. It was about bringing your spirit and your physical form together and what not. I really don't have much to say because she summed it up everything for herself, and it was like a fire. It was like she's a firebrand. I knew that she's a firebrand, but to experience her in person from the green room, I think it was an out of the world experience. And
And
I was thinking, she's a PSAI member. I am a PSAI member, and I was like, how did I get so lucky to be in such proximity to have uh, opportunities, continuing opportunities to talk to people like her. So she is one person, but everybody has had a unique journey at PSAI. And I was just thinking that, and maybe, expressing some gratitude silently, that how did I get this lucky?
what
That's
what
all from
what
my
you
end.
said is, I know what you said is absolutely right. PSCI has such a beautiful gems which are there, and when I came to know first about Anjali, I was like, I want to bring her to the talk show. But yes, it was in June when I first time heard her speaking when she was invited to the Chennai chapter. That is where I was like, she's coming to the talk show. There are a lot of things that still we need to tap it. And Lokesh has very rightly summed this entire talk show today, that Kintsugi your life.
Life,
And what
absolutely.
Anjali mentioned, what Anjali mentioned was absolutely right. We have a lot of broken pieces. How we bring those pieces together using gold is what today's my takeaway was, and it was amazing. It was
Absolutely,
fantastic.
absolutely. And I loved the fact that she was talking about adding layers. She said, I'd had a tragedy. I could motivate people just with that one story. But whatever I did after that, it was about adding layers. So, and it is so relevant for all professional speakers that yes, you have a niche, but once you have defined your niche, you've got to add layers to that so that you have a wider, you have the in-depth knowledge of your niche, but then you have a scope, a possibility to take it as wide as possible, to reach out to as many people as possible with your story. So, yes, I think, yes, thank you again, Bharti, for having that thought and taking that action and bringing Anjali to the talk show. And that also reminds me that this is our opportunity to invite anybody who has a unique story, who thinks they have a story to share to the world, to become a member of the PSAI, that's the Professional Speakers Association of India, and visit www.psai.in for further details and come and be a part of this wonderful, wonderful learning community, which tells you how to tell your story to the world. It gives you that platform. So that's about it for tonight from my end, Bharti. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anu, for joining this talk show. It is always good to have a buddy, a co-host with you. It gives us that energy that yes, somebody's with you. So thank you so much for doing this, Anu.
Thank
I'll
you,
see you.
Bharti. Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much. Good night.
Good night. So here's we are. We are with one more talk show, one more PSAI talk show. And every Friday at 9 p.m., we log in to bring in front of you amazing, amazing professional speakers, our PSAI members. They have a very, very strong message. They are expert in their domain and they have so many layers of experiences that can bring a huge difference in your life. And I would definitely want you all to go back, watch the recording of today's talk show. I'm sure with every moment that you'll be watching today, you will be going back with so many pearls that you will capture. And with this, take your leave. Have a fantastic, fantastic year coming through. Good night and take care. Stay safe. Stay blessed. Bye bye.